You know those moments that blindside you? When something so ordinary, so routine, suddenly veers sideways and drops you into a version of your life that doesn't feel like your own anymore. That's what this story is. And if you're a parent, or even if you're not, I promise you, what happened to my son that afternoon is going to shake you. Because the truth is, sometimes the people closest to us can become strangers right before our eyes. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you trust the most might not even be who you think they are anymore. You came here for answers. I know. And I'm going to give you every single one. But I need you to stay with me, because this isn't just a story about a little boy being scared of his mother. It's about how a perfectly normal family, just like yours or mine, started slipping into something unrecognizable. And the deeper I looked, the more I realized, my wife wasn't just changing. She was vanishing. It started with a scream. Not the kind you hear in horror movies. Not loud or bloody. It was a sharp, short sound, like someone had gasped but couldn't breathe afterward. I was in the kitchen making grilled cheese, our usual lazy Saturday lunch. My son, Jamie, was out in the yard playing with his dinosaur toys under the tree. And my wife, his mom, was upstairs folding laundry, or so I thought. I didn't even glance at the clock. That's how normal it all was. Until Jamie screamed. I dropped the spatula and ran to the window, heart already pounding in that weird, parental way that mixes instinct with pure adrenaline. He was frozen halfway between the tree and the porch. His little fists were clenched, his legs stiff like he was trying not to shake. But his eyes, God, his eyes, were wide open and locked on the front door like he'd seen something he couldn't explain. I pushed open the back door and called out, "Jamie? What happened, buddy?" But he didn't move. Didn't answer. Just shook his head violently and shouted something that made my blood go ice cold. Asterisk, that's not my real mom anymore. Asterisk. Let me stop here and ask you, what would you do? What would run through your head if your own child looked at your spouse, the person they've known and loved every day of their life, and said they weren't real anymore? You'd want to believe it was just their imagination, right? Maybe they had a nightmare, maybe they were playing pretend, maybe, just maybe, it was a weird joke. That's what I wanted to believe too. But the problem was, Jamie wasn't joking. His whole body was trembling. He refused to step foot on the porch even as I walked toward him. And when I glanced back at the front door, expecting to see my wife standing there with a confused look, maybe holding laundry or her phone, there was no one. Or at least I thought there was no one. Then the door creaked open wider. Slowly. Like someone had just peeked through it and disappeared before I turned around. No footsteps. No voice calling out to Jamie. Just a growing silence that felt heavier than it should have. I grabbed Jamie and carried him back inside through the back entrance, trying to reassure him while my own skin crawled with unease. He wouldn't look at the front hallway. Wouldn't even lift his head. Just kept whispering, "That's not her. That's not her. Her eyes are wrong." Now listen, I know how this might sound. You might be wondering if we'd watched a scary movie the night before or if he had some overactive imagination like kids do. But Jamie's 6. He's bright, observant, and honestly kind of quiet. He's never said anything like this before. And the way he clung to me, that wasn't fear. That was terror. The kind that sits deep in the gut and makes you doubt the ground under your feet. I told him everything was okay even though I didn't believe it. And that's when he said something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up straight. Asterisk, she blinked, "Daddy?" But her eyes didn't close. Not all the way. Asterisk. There's a moment as a parent when the world splits. When you hear something from your child that feels like a riddle from a dream, but it's coming out of their mouth, real and trembling. That was mine. I didn't even know how to respond. I just hugged him tighter and walked us both to the kitchen. But as we passed the hallway, I caught a glimpse of the staircase. Of movement. Someone, or something, was watching us from the top. I called out, "Hey honey? Everything okay?" But no answer came. Jamie hid behind my leg like he couldn't even bear to look up. And slowly, footsteps began descending the stairs. Not heavy ones. Careful. Measured. Like whoever, or whatever, was walking wanted us to hear just enough to let us know they were coming. I held Jamie close, heart beating through my chest, and tried to tell myself I was being paranoid. But then she appeared. Was my wife. Or at least she looked like my wife. Same long auburn hair, same flannel shirt she'd been wearing that morning. But something about her smile was off. Just a little too wide. Her eyes, too glassy. Like she'd forgotten how to blink naturally. And when she spoke, her voice had this slight delay, like she was answering a question I hadn't asked yet. "There you are," she said, smiling down at Jamie. "Come here, sweetheart." Jamie buried his face in my leg. I told her he was feeling sick and took him back to the den, locking the door behind us, something I had never in our entire marriage done before. She didn't knock, didn't follow, just stood there on the other side for a moment, then walked away. At that point you'd think I'd start losing it, right? I thought maybe I was imagining things. Maybe stress was getting to me. But Jamie was clinging to me like his life depended on it, and I couldn't ignore the fear in his voice. "She's pretending, Daddy," he whispered. "She smells different. And her smile's not real. She's trying to trick you." That night, I waited until my wife, who acted like nothing had happened, went to sleep. She curled into bed beside me like she always did, kissed my cheek and whispered good night. But even then, even in that quiet moment, my mind was racing. Something about her touch didn't feel right. Her hand was too cold. Her breathing was too still. And when I glanced at her, she was already staring at me, eyes wide open. She didn't blink. "Are you still with me?" Because what happened next is where everything I thought I knew about our lives started unraveling. This wasn't just a case of my son being scared or me being paranoid. Over the next few days, the signs kept coming. Subtle changes that only Jamie and I seemed to notice. The way she stopped calling him by the little nickname she'd used since he was a baby. The way she'd pause just a little too long before answering simple questions. And the worst part? Her reflection in the bathroom mirror didn't always match her movement. I need you to really think about that. Have you ever looked in a mirror and felt like something on the other side was just slightly out of sync? Like there's a half-second delay you can't quite explain? That's what Jamie saw. That's what I saw. And that's when I started digging. Into her past. Into our home security footage. Into everything I could find that might tell me if I was losing my mind, or if someone or something had truly taken the place of the woman I loved. And what I discovered. Let's just say it changed everything. But before I take you there, I want you to think about one thing. If the person you loved most suddenly began acting just a little bit off, smiling too long, forgetting small things, getting your name slightly wrong, how long would it take you to admit they weren't who they claimed to be? That's where I was. Torn between the woman I married and the thing sleeping beside me. And what I found in our basement sealed it. But we'll get to that. Because what Jamie said the next morning, just 6 words, would tear open the entire truth I'd been avoiding. He looked me dead in the eyes and whispered, "She doesn't bleed the right color." I barely slept that night. I kept my eyes on her, or the thing wearing her skin, while pretending to drift off under the covers. Every shallow breath she took, every shift of the mattress I noted. And even though she moved like my wife and spoke like her, I couldn't shake the growing certainty that something was inhabiting her, like someone wearing a mask that didn't quite fit. You ever stare at someone you've known for years and suddenly get the feeling they're studying you? That's what it felt like. Like she was learning me from the inside out. And Jamie, he didn't even want to be in the same room with her. He slept with the blanket pulled over his head in the den, clutching the stuffed bear his mom had sewn him for his 5th birthday. Ironic, isn't it? She made it for him, and now he wouldn't touch anything else in the house she'd ever handled. By morning I was running on adrenaline and dread. I kept waiting for her to slip, say something she shouldn't know or miss something only my real wife would catch. But she didn't. She packed Jamie's lunch, kissed my cheek, and poured her coffee like it was any other Tuesday. And that's what scared me the most, the seamless normalcy. It was like she'd rehearsed every movement, every line of dialogue. I watched her hum a tune from Jamie's favorite show as she rinsed dishes in the sink, her head tilted just slightly, the rhythm a beat off, like someone remembering a song they heard in a dream. That's when I knew this wasn't a momentary episode. This was something deeper. Something that had slipped in quietly and decided to stay. I started digging. Not into her phone, because that was missing, conveniently, lost on a trip to the grocery store the week before, but into our shared memories. Things only the two of us would know. I started asking her questions, innocent ones. What was the name of that restaurant we got food poisoning from in Ohio? Who did we see at the lake last 4th of July? She answered them all, but always after a pause. And sometimes just barely wrong. Not enough to be glaring, but enough that I felt it in my gut. She said Lakewood Grill, but I remembered it being Lakeside Tavern. She said we saw my cousin Eric at the fireworks show, but Eric moved to Boston 2 years ago. She even got our wedding song wrong, by 1 word. Small details that could pass as slips, sure. But when those small details begin to pile up, you start to wonder what the bigger lie is hiding behind them. I should tell you something about my wife, my real wife, Melissa. She wasn't the type to forget things. She had this razor-sharp memory, could recite the birthdays of everyone on both sides of our family without blinking. And she was intuitive. She could tell when Jamie was faking a stomachache to skip school, or when I was lying about how long I'd actually been stuck at work. She was present. Grounded. She laughed with her whole chest, not with that tight, plastic smile this version wore like a badge of normalcy. And she would never forget our anniversary. But 2 days ago when I asked her what she wanted to do for it, just to test her, she looked up from her cup and said, "Oh, is that this month?" That was the crack. The first real, undeniable fracture. But before you jump to conclusions, no, Melissa hadn't been acting like this for months. In fact, the change was recent. I remember it vividly because it started right after she came back from a weekend retreat. Some wellness thing her sister had recommended. 3 days in a cabin out near Mount Hood with no cell service and a group of women she'd supposedly met through a yoga class I'd never heard her mention before. I wasn't thrilled about it. Jamie had a soccer game that Saturday and she never missed those, but she insisted. Said she needed space. Said she hadn't been sleeping well. And to be honest, we had been a little off. Work stress, parenting exhaustion. It wears on a marriage. I figured a break would do her good. But when she came back, she was different. Not in an obvious way. Not like in the movies where someone walks in with black eyes and floating off the floor. No, this was subtle. It was in the way she hugged Jamie, tight but almost unsure, like she was mimicking something she'd seen. It was in the way she kissed me, too long, too slow, like she was trying to remember how lips worked. And her phone being gone? That was just the start. She said it fell in a creek, but when I asked what creek, she couldn't remember the name. Couldn't even remember the trail they'd hiked. When I pressed her about who else was there, she got defensive. Irritated. Not like her. I called her sister the next day casually asking how the retreat went. And that's when the floor beneath me really started to crack. Because her sister, Jenna, sounded confused. Said she hadn't spoken to Melissa in over a month. Said she never recommended any retreat. When I told her what Melissa said, Jenna went quiet. I didn't even know she left for the weekend, she said. She didn't tell me anything about a trip. So if Jenna didn't send her, who did? I tried calling the yoga studio Melissa supposedly joined, only to find it had shut down over a year ago. No forwarding number. No online listing. It was like it never existed. That night I couldn't hold it in anymore. After Jamie went to sleep, I confronted her. Told her Jenna said she'd never heard of the retreat. Told her the studio was gone. Told her nothing added up. She just smiled and said, "You must be misremembering. You know how your mind gets when you're tired." Gaslighting. Classic. But that wasn't her style. Melissa never used manipulation to win arguments. She was direct, sometimes brutally honest. But not this, and when I pressed her again she turned icy cold. Her expression dropped. Her voice monotone. "You're being paranoid," she said. "Go to bed." And that was that. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Because now I had questions I couldn't stop asking myself. Was Melissa ever really at that retreat? If not, where did she go? And more terrifying, asterisk, who came back in her place? Asterisk. At this point, I know what you might be thinking. Maybe she's having a breakdown. Maybe there's a medical explanation. I thought the same. I even made an appointment for her to see a doctor under the guise of a routine checkup. But she canceled it. Said she was feeling better. Her tone was clipped. Final. The next morning, Jamie woke up screaming. He said she'd come into his room at night and sat on his bed. But when she leaned down to kiss his forehead, he looked up and saw it. Her eyes weren't right. He said they shimmered in the dark. Not glowing. Just reflecting light that wasn't there. Like mirrors. Cold. Empty. He said her hand felt too heavy, like it had weight it shouldn't. And worst of all, when she whispered his name, she said it wrong. She used my voice. "I'm telling you this because I need you to understand. Something happened to my wife. And whatever came back wearing her face is trying really hard to keep the illusion alive. But Jamie's not fooled. I'm not either. And the more I try to act normal, the more it studies me, waiting for me to slip. Like it's playing a long game, learning how to be human in plain sight. There were moments, brief, uncanny moments, where I thought she was back. Like when she laughed at a rerun of our favorite show or when she danced in the kitchen while making pancakes. But then she'd freeze, almost like she forgot the rhythm. Like she was trying too hard to be natural. And when I'd catch her watching me, just standing in the hallway half hidden by shadow, it sent chills down my spine. I started reviewing our home security footage, desperate to find proof. Maybe something from the night she returned. But to my horror, the footage for those 3 days was gone. Deleted. Only those files. I didn't erase them. Jamie sure didn't. And she swore she never touched the system. But the data wasn't just missing, it had been wiped. erased with precision. Like someone didn't just want to cover their tracks, they wanted to erase their arrival entirely. Now here's where things get more complicated. I began noticing strange things around the neighborhood. A man in a tan coat parked across the street 3 nights in a row, engine running. I walked toward his car once to ask if he needed help, and he peeled off without a word. A strange white envelope slid under our front door with no stamp, no return address, and nothing inside but a slip of paper that read, "Keep him away from her." That same night, our power cut off for exactly 47 minutes. When it came back, the hallway mirror had a crack that wasn't there before. And through it all, Melissa, or the version of her now living with us, acted like nothing was wrong. I tried calling my brother, who's always been the voice of reason, someone who doesn't entertain anything he can't explain with logic. But even he said something that stopped me in my tracks. After I told him everything, he went quiet for a while, then said, "You know, when she came to visit us last summer, Jamie cried the whole night after she tucked him in. Said she wasn't the same. I thought it was just homesickness. But now I'm not so sure. So maybe this didn't start with the retreat. Maybe it started earlier. Maybe she's been becoming something else, slowly. Like a copy degrading each time it tries to be human again. I want to believe there's an explanation. Something rational. Medical. Psychological. But every path I follow leads to more questions, more inconsistencies. And Jamie, he's the only one who sees it clearly. That innocence, that unfiltered intuition kids have? It's more powerful than we realize. He doesn't care what's rational. He knows what he feels. And what he feels is this: his mother is gone. And maybe, just maybe, that thing wearing her skin is waiting for me to stop looking. Because the minute I let my guard down, it'll show me what it really is. And that basement? That's where the truth began to claw its way into the light. But not all truths should be found. Especially when they're already watching. It was 2 nights later when things took a turn I hadn't prepared for. I was in the garage digging through old storage bins, chasing a thought that wouldn't let me sleep. I remembered Melissa used to keep a journal, one of those thick leather-bound ones with the strap wrapped around it 3 times. She was never one for oversharing even with me, but she wrote in it religiously every night. If something had changed in her, or if someone had taken her place, maybe that journal could give me something. A clue. A breadcrumb. But after tearing through every box labeled M stuff, it was gone. I checked the drawers, the cabinets, even the crawlspace under the stairs. Nothing. I knew I'd seen it before. Jamie once brought it to her bedside asking if it was a magic book, and she laughed and said, "No, baby. Just my memories." But now it was like it never existed. I didn't tell her I was looking for it. But the next morning she made French toast, my favorite, and smiled across the table. "You didn't sleep much last night," she said. "Looking for something?" Her voice was calm, almost warm. But there was something behind her eyes, like she knew what I'd been doing. Like she was watching me even when she wasn't in the room. I forced a laugh, said I was just restless. She nodded slowly and placed another slice of toast on my plate. "Well, I hope you find whatever it is." I didn't eat it. I couldn't. Later that day, I went back into our home office and tried accessing our cloud backups. Melissa had everything synced. Photos, documents, even her old diary entries. But the folders had been renamed. Not deleted. Renamed to nonsense strings. Symbols. Random characters. Like someone wanted to hide them in plain sight. I clicked on one. It opened a corrupted video file, blurry, no sound. Just grainy footage of our living room. But what made my stomach drop was the date. It was from 3 weeks before she went to the retreat. And in the frame I saw her. Melissa. Standing completely still in the middle of the room at 3:27 a.m., just watching the staircase. Not moving. Not blinking. Just waiting. I tried downloading it to show someone, maybe my brother, maybe even a professional. But the moment I hit save, the screen went black. Whole system crashed. When it rebooted, the file was gone. No trace of it. Not even in the recycle bin. And that was the moment I realized, whatever's happening here doesn't want to be found. Every time I get close, the path vanishes. I started writing everything down, keeping a notebook hidden in my car. Every detail, every shift in her behavior, every strange moment with Jamie. I didn't know if I was documenting evidence or just trying to keep myself sane. But I needed to anchor my reality somewhere because the house didn't feel like mine anymore. Rooms felt colder. Lights flickered without cause. Mirrors seemed to reflect things just a split second late. Jamie refused to go upstairs alone. He said there were shadows in the walls. And one night, I woke up to find him standing by my side of the bed, pale and shaking, whispering, she knows you're writing things down. Asterisk. I knew then I needed help. Someone outside the house. Someone who knew Melissa, before. I thought of Sarah, her best friend from college. We hadn't spoken in a few years, after a falling out over something I never fully understood. But Sarah knew Melissa like no one else. I found her on Facebook, messaged her. Asked if she'd noticed anything strange when they last spoke. Told her it was urgent. She replied the next day. I've been waiting for you to reach out. We need to talk. But not over text. Meet me tomorrow. Bring Jamie. And don't tell her. That was the first message that made me feel less crazy. Like someone else saw it. Like I wasn't imagining the cracks. I packed a bag that night. Nothing obvious. Just a few essentials in case we had to leave fast. I told Jamie we were going on a dad day adventure. He nodded without asking questions. It's like he already knew. The next morning I woke early, heart pounding. Melissa was already downstairs cooking. Bacon, eggs, coffee, the whole setup. Too much for a Tuesday. She greeted me with a kiss, looked me in the eyes and said, "It's going to be a beautiful day, isn't it?" My stomach flipped. She never used to talk like that. Her language lately was more polished. Like dialogue written by someone trying to sound human. I smiled, nodded and said Jamie and I were going out for breakfast. She tilted her head too far and said, "Drive safe." Then she handed me Jamie's backpack. Already packed. That stopped me cold. I hadn't told her we were going anywhere. And Jamie hadn't either. He barely looked at her anymore. I took the bag, unzipped it when she wasn't looking. Inside was a change of clothes, 2 granola bars and his stuffed bear. I hadn't packed that. We drove in silence, Jamie unusually quiet in the back seat. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror and said, "We're going to see someone who might help, okay?" He just nodded and whispered, "She's following us." I didn't see anyone behind us. No cars for blocks. But when I stopped at a light and checked my mirrors again, I saw a figure standing at the far end of the street. A woman in a long gray coat, unmoving, staring at our car. I blinked and she was gone. Sarah lived 3 towns over. We reached her apartment by late morning. She met us at the door looking older than I remembered, thinner too. She didn't waste time on greetings. Just pulled us inside, locked the door behind us and checked the peephole twice. Then she turned to me and said, "I knew it wasn't her the moment she called me last month. That caught me off guard." "Wait, she called you?" Sarah nodded. "She said she wanted to meet. Said she was trying to reconnect with the people she used to know. But the way she talked, it was like she'd memorized a script. She asked questions about things we did in college, but they weren't her questions. It felt like she was testing me." I asked what happened during their meeting. Sarah bit her lip, hesitant, then walked to her bookshelf and pulled out a small black box. Inside was a flash drive. "She left this at my place," Sarah said. Said it was an old project from school. But when I plugged it in, it wasn't hers. It was footage, dozens of clips. Hidden camera stuff. Most of it inside your house. My hand shook as I took it. She went on. "I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want to get involved. But I've been having dreams. And lately, I think someone's watching me too." That's when Jamie, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, looked up and said, "It's not just watching anymore. It's looking for a new one." Sarah stared at him, then at me. What does he mean by that? I didn't know. Not yet. But when I plugged the drive into Sarah's laptop, the files wouldn't open. They were encrypted. All except one. A grainy video labeled *test \_004. It showed Melissa, our Melissa, tied to a chair in a dimly lit room. Crying. Begging someone off-screen not to take her son. And in the final frame, a voice, not hers, not anyone I recognized, whispered, "You should have stopped digging." And then the screen went black. That I stared at the frozen video frame long after the screen had gone black. The echo of that voice, cold, smooth, inhuman, still crawling down my spine like a whisper you can't unhear. The room was quiet, suffocatingly so, except for Jamie's soft breathing and Sarah pacing across the creaky floorboards, chewing the side of her thumbnail. She wasn't saying anything, but the panic in her eyes said enough. She'd been holding onto this footage for weeks, maybe longer, living with the knowledge that something horrific was unraveling around our family, and now that it was out in the open, there was no putting it back. I looked at Jamie, whose small face was pale but calm, unsettlingly calm, and I could tell. He had known long before I did that the woman in our home was not coming back. But now there was a bigger question clawing its way to the surface. If Melissa was still alive somewhere, tied to a chair in some godforsaken room, then what exactly had taken her place? I didn't even have time to process that before Sarah's phone buzzed on the table. She reached for it absent-mindedly, still pacing, but when she glanced at the screen, her breath hitched. "What is it?" I asked, already on edge. She hesitated, then slowly turned the screen toward me. It was a text from an unknown number. No name. No contact photo. Just one line, asterisk, "Stop helping him. She warned you." Asterisk. A chill swept through the room like a draft no one had noticed before. Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she put the phone back down, and for the first time since we arrived, she looked genuinely afraid. Not just worried, asterisk targeted, asterisk. I asked if she'd gotten anything like that before. She nodded slowly. "A few weeks ago, before she showed up, I got an email. No subject. No body. Just an attachment. I deleted it without opening it. I thought it was spam." But now she wasn't so sure. She didn't even want to check her laptop, convinced that opening it might trigger something else. I couldn't blame her. At this point, nothing felt safe. Not our technology, not our memories, not even the people we thought we knew. Because if someone had access to our house, to our devices, and could slip in and out of our lives without us noticing, what else could they do? That's when I got the call. My phone lit up, vibrating against the table like it was alive. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. A raspy male voice, low and garbled, came through. "You've seen too much," it said. "Leave the drive. Leave the boy. Go home and pretend." Then it hung up. I didn't even have time to respond. My hand was still holding the phone when I noticed Jamie staring at me. "Daddy," he said softly. "He sounds like the man from the dream." My blood ran cold. I hadn't described the voice to anyone, hadn't said a word about what was said, but Jamie, he just knew. And the way he said it, not scared, just certain, it wasn't normal. Not for a 6-year-old. Not even close. That night, Sarah insisted we stay at her place, said she didn't trust me going back to the house. Not yet. I agreed. But I barely slept. I kept checking the door, the windows, the shadows under the furniture. Jamie finally drifted off around 3 a.m. on the couch, clinging to that stuffed bear like it was the last real thing in his world. I sat up with Sarah, nursing a cold cup of coffee and going through every possible angle. What if the retreat never existed? What if the thing pretending to be Melissa wasn't alone? What if this was part of something bigger? And that's when Sarah said something that knocked the breath out of me. I don't think she was the first. I turned to her, confused. She leaned in and lowered her voice even though we were alone. "Back in college, before Melissa met you, there was a guy she dated. Real intense. Obsessed with folklore, ancient rituals, cult stuff. He used to talk about how some people weren't real, how they were copies. Shells, he'd say, the ones who come back aren't the ones who left. She broke up with him when he started talking about how you could replace someone without anyone noticing if you just learned enough about them. I thought he was insane. But maybe she didn't leave him. Maybe he found her again." The name came back to her after a moment. Asterisk Eli Rourke. Asterisk she said he was off the grid now, no social media, no digital trail at all. But he used to keep a blog back in the early 2000s, full of paranoid essays and conspiracy-laced articles about emulated consciousness, psychic extraction, and something called the Seamless Ones. She said it like she hadn't said the name in years, and it sent a weird weight into the room. I asked her to show me the blog, but it had been scrubbed from the web, completely. Even archive tools couldn't find it. Like someone didn't just delete it, they erased the memory of it ever existing. I knew I had to go back to the house. Not to confront the thing living there, but because there was something I needed to see again. Something I missed. I didn't tell Sarah or Jamie, I just left around dawn, drove the hour and a half back in silence, watching every car behind me, every pedestrian I passed. When I pulled into the driveway, everything looked normal. Too normal. The porch light was off. The lawn was still wet with dew. Melissa's, or its, car was gone. I stepped inside carefully, half expecting alarms or shadows or worse, but the house was quiet. So, that's when I went down to the basement. It had been bothering me for weeks, the smell. Not strong, just faint. Metallic. Like old blood or rusted iron. I'd written it off, blamed the pipes, the sump pump. But today I followed it. There was a wooden shelf pressed against the back wall, nothing special. But when I moved it, I found the latch. Hidden in the paneling. A small square of darkness gaped open behind it, like a throat waiting to be fed. I stepped inside and immediately felt the temperature drop. The space wasn't big, maybe 6 by 6, just concrete and dust and a low-hanging bulb. But scrawled across the back wall in what looked like charcoal, or something darker, was a symbol. I didn't recognize it. Three intersecting lines in a circular pattern, like an eye with too many pupils. Beneath it, a word, asterisk proxy. Asterisk. That's when my phone buzzed again. It was a voicemail. From my brother. His voice was shaky, panicked. I got something in the mail. No name. Just a USB drive. Thought it was junk. But when I played it, it was her, Melissa. But she was screaming. Saying not to trust you, said you weren't who you think you are. The voicemail ended there. And suddenly, everything inside me froze. Because if that message was real, if Melissa really said that, then everything I thought I knew, every assumption I'd made, every line I drew between what was real and what wasn't, maybe it was all backwards. Maybe I wasn't the one hunting the lie. Maybe I was part of it. I didn't realize someone was following me until I reached the main road. That's when I saw the same black SUV for the third time, idling behind a row of parked cars. At first I thought it might have been a neighbor. But the way it inched forward only when I moved, the way the tinted windows never revealed a face, it made the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up. I didn't slow down, didn't look back again. I just drove. Faster than I should have, blowing through a yellow light and taking back roads I hadn't used in years. But when I glanced in my rearview mirror, the SUV was still there, tailing me at a distance. No turn signals, no aggression, just presence. That's what made it worse. It didn't feel like someone trying to catch me. It felt like someone watching. Someone making sure I didn't get too far from the answers I wasn't supposed to have. I made it to a gas station just outside the next town and pulled in hard. Slammed the door and went inside under the glare of fluorescent lights, surrounded by people buying coffee and lottery tickets like the world wasn't coming apart. I told myself I was just being paranoid. That maybe it was coincidence, stress, lack of sleep. But when I turned around and saw the SUV slowly cruise past the front of the store and park across the street, engine still running, headlights off, I felt the panic seize me in a way that no logic could dismiss. I wasn't just being watched. I was being tracked. I called Sarah. No answer. Called again. Straight to voicemail. I texted her, asterisk, are you okay? Call me. Something's wrong. Asterisk nothing. I tried the landline at her house. It rang twice then cut off. My gut twisted. She wasn't the type to ignore calls, not after everything we'd seen, especially not now. I stayed in the gas station, pretending to look at snacks, trying not to draw attention. The clerk behind the counter gave me a suspicious glance, like he'd seen this kind of jittery behavior before, people hiding from things they couldn't name. Eventually the SUV pulled away. I waited 5 more minutes, then bolted to my car and drove straight to Sarah's place. When I got there, her front door was wide open. There were no signs of struggle, nothing broken, no overturned furniture, but her purse was on the floor and the coffee pot was still half full, steaming like she'd just left seconds ago. I called out her name. No answer. Jamie's blanket was still folded on the couch, but the boy himself was gone. My throat closed up. I searched every room, checked the backyard, the street, nothing. It was like they'd vanished. Or worse, like they'd been taken. My mind spiraled. Was this retaliation for the video? For finding the room in the basement? For saying her name out loud? Then I saw it. Taped to Sarah's refrigerator door was a Polaroid. No envelope. No message. Just the photo. It showed Jamie sitting at what looked like a kitchen table, but not our kitchen. The lighting was wrong. Too dim. The walls behind him weren't painted, just raw concrete. In the photo he looked scared. Not crying but frozen. His eyes weren't looking at the camera. They were looking just past it, like someone was standing behind the lens. Someone he knew. Someone he couldn't scream in front of. My knees buckled and I had to sit down. I tried to tell myself this was just another warning. That they wouldn't actually hurt him. But that voice from the video, the one that told Jamie, you shouldn't be here, he might hear you, echoed in my brain. Who was he? Was this person, or thing, in the basement connected to Jamie now? Had Jamie been marked from the beginning? Every memory started to twist itself. The imaginary friend, the fear of the dark, the way he'd stared at Melissa that night she came back. Had he known she wasn't his real mom? Had he known before I did? I gathered myself enough to search the house. That's when I found Sarah's laptop, still open on her desk, browser windows flashing in sleep mode. I moved the mouse and was hit with a cascade of open tabs. She'd been digging deep. Not just blog archives or cult theories, but forums. Encrypted message boards with names like the Seamless Archives, Memory is a Lie, and Proxy Manifest. One post in particular stood out. It was titled, asterisk asterisk they come back when we're weakest, and we're the faces we can't forget. Asterisk asterisk, the post claimed that certain individuals, often after a traumatic event, grief, mental breakdown, illness, would become vulnerable to reconstruction. That something would fill their place. Something designed to ease the pain, to lull the people around them into acceptance. They'd laugh the same, cook the same, smell the same. But they weren't alive. They were asterisk replicas. Emulations. Shadows given flesh, asterisk. And the most disturbing part? There were entire support groups, not therapy forums but survivors, people claiming that a loved one had returned from a hospital, a car crash, even from a coma, but wasn't them anymore. And every one of those stories ended the same way: the survivor was silenced, or disappeared, or written off as unstable. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, staring at the Polaroid. My heart was beating so fast I could barely focus. I wasn't just chasing a mystery anymore. I was running from something that already knew where I lived, who I loved, and how far I'd go to bring them back. And it was playing with me, giving me pieces, knowing I'd stitch them together, leading me somewhere. And that somewhere was starting to feel like a trap. The TV turned on by itself. Just static at first. Then a flicker. A home video, our old backyard. A birthday party. Jamie was turning 4. Melissa, asterisk the real one asterisk, was lighting candles on the cake. But then the footage glitched, jumped forward, and she was gone. The camera kept rolling, but her place was taken by a blur. A shadow where she should have been. And from the speaker, barely audible, came a whisper. Asterisk, you shouldn't have opened the room. Asterisk. I yanked the plug out of the wall. The screen went dark. I was shaking now deep in my bones. Not just because I was afraid, but because for the first time I was starting to believe something inhuman was orchestrating this. Not a stalker. Not a man. But something older. Something patient. Something that didn't need to chase us. It just needed us to look long enough to notice. That's when my phone buzzed. One new message. No number. Just a link. And the words, asterisk, this time, it's you who isn't real. Asterisk. I didn't open the link right away. I just stared at the message, my finger hovering, heart thundering in my ears like it was trying to warn me not to touch it. But the thing is, when you're deep enough into a mystery like this, when your child's missing, when the woman you loved might not have ever come back as herself, curiosity stops being a choice. It becomes survival. So I tapped it. And it didn't lead to some glitchy video or virus-ridden page like I expected. It led to a live feed. A surveillance-style view of a room. Cement walls, no windows, a single chair bolted to the center of the floor. And sitting in that chair, barely conscious, was me. I froze. It wasn't a look-alike. It wasn't some deep-fake trick. It was me, same clothes I wore 3 days ago. Same cut on my chin from when I slipped shaving last week. Even the twitch in my left hand when I'm anxious, it was all there. But whoever, or whatever, I was watching wasn't watching me back. He looked dazed, sedated maybe. His eyes fluttered, head bobbing forward. And behind him, just visible in the shadows, was a man I hadn't seen in years. My brother Caleb. That hit like a gut punch. Caleb had been off the grid for a decade, ever since that breakdown after Mom died. I hadn't heard from him since he left the rehab center. Rumors floated. He'd gone to South America, joined a doomsday cult, got arrested in Nevada for trespassing at a military base. I believed all of it and none of it. But now here he was, standing behind me, his face gaunt, eyes sunken, watching the copy like a scientist watches a failed experiment. And suddenly, a floodgate opened in my memory. Caleb used to obsess over identity theory. Not just psychology but fringe science, stuff about dual consciousness, multiverse leakage, digital soul prints. He once told me, dead serious, that the only thing keeping us from being replaced wasn't reality, it was belief. That if enough people believed a person had changed, the change would become real. I thought it was the drugs talking. I laughed it off back then. But now, staring at that room, at myself chained and sedated, while I stood here in Sarah's dark house in my own skin, I couldn't laugh anymore. My phone rang. I nearly dropped it. The name on the screen, Melissa. Not a number. Not a text. A full-blown video call. My pulse spiked. I answered. She was sitting somewhere dim, her face lit by a single overhead bulb. Her hair was messy, her eyes bloodshot, but it was her. Or the version I'd come to accept. She looked at me like she already knew what I'd seen. You weren't supposed to remember, she said, voice shaking. Not this soon. I didn't speak. I couldn't. They didn't take Jamie. He took himself. He's been waking up, piece by piece, since before you even noticed the locket. My throat tightened. Waking up. Melissa nodded slowly, painfully, like every word weighed a ton. He was never just a boy. You never were just you. Caleb started the process years ago before he disappeared. He called it mirroring. Said we'd never have to grieve again if we just downloaded the soul before the body gave out. But it didn't work like that. The mirrors didn't stay reflections. They began to believe they were real. And the real ones, well, most of them were put away. I shook my head. No, this is insane. I'm not some mirror. But she looked at me the way someone looks at a dying thing, soft, regretful, knowing. Then tell me where you were 3 days ago. Tell me what you ate for dinner. Who you spoke to. Tell me the name of your childhood dog without looking at a picture. The silence roared louder than any scream. I know you feel real, she whispered. But so did I. So did we all. Until the memories stopped sinking. And that's when I understood. That glitch in the TV footage? The sudden silence when I'd say Melissa's name? The way Jamie looked at me with wide, glassy eyes like I was the stranger? It wasn't fear. It was recognition. He knew. He remembered me, not as his father but as the man who used to be his father. The way I remembered him not as a child but as a version of someone I loved. Every feeling, every emotion I'd held so close. All of it might have been transferred data, downloaded affection. A shadow life built from grief and memory. I hung up the call. My legs gave out and I sat on the cold floor. My phone buzzed again. A new message, this one from an anonymous contact. It said, *, he is coming home. Only one of you gets to stay. *. I didn't understand what it meant, not fully. But deep down, something primal did. There wasn't room for both versions. And now that I was awake, someone was going to make sure the wrong one didn't survive the night. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the corner of the bedroom with the door locked, the phone still clutched in my hand, the words from the last message pulsing in my brain like a heartbeat I couldn't silence. * he is coming home. Only one of you gets to stay. * Every creak of the house felt calculated. Every shift in the wind outside sounded like someone inching closer. But the worst part wasn't the fear, it was the knowing. Knowing that maybe I was never the real one to begin with. That maybe I was just some copy, fabricated by grief, carried by Caleb's delusions, believed into existence by a family that couldn't bear to lose me. If that was true, then what was I supposed to do now? Protect the life I had or surrender it to the original me? Just after 3 a.m. my sister showed up. I hadn't seen Rachel in months. Not since Dad's funeral. She looked tired, her clothes wrinkled, mascara smeared like she'd driven all night without stopping. When I opened the door, she didn't say anything at first. Just stared at me. I half expected her to cry or hug me. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a flash drive and pressed it into my hand. I know what you've seen, she said softly. And I know what you are, but you deserve to choose for yourself. The words sliced deeper than she could have known. She knew, she didn't hesitate. No struggle, no disbelief. She'd known this whole time. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My throat locked. My legs felt like rubber. My own sister, someone I shared a childhood with, birthday cakes, scraped knees, backyard forts, and now she was looking at me like I was a file to be deleted or saved. Inside the living room, I plugged the drive into my laptop with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. It wasn't just video. It was everything. Caleb's research logs. Hundreds of audio files. Footage of trials, copies glitching, melting down, breaking apart when confronted with the truth. But most disturbing of all was the one marked, first success, subject, James Carter. That was me. I sat in silence as my own face stared back from the screen, only younger, thinner, eyes brighter. Caleb's voice narrated over the top. Initial download complete. Neural sync successful. Subject believes he's real. Behavior indistinguishable. Family has not noticed. I couldn't breathe. Rachel sat across from me, not saying a word until the last clip ended. We thought we lost you when the fire happened. But Caleb, he couldn't accept it. He swore he could bring you back. He said he could do what no one else dared, restore the soul through memory architecture. Your body was never recovered because it didn't matter. You were already archived. I felt like vomiting. You let this happen? She flinched. We were desperate. Melissa was broken. Jamie didn't understand death yet. You were the only thing holding us together. And when you came back, when you remembered his favorite stories, her tea order, my birthday, we didn't care how it happened. We just needed you. I turned away. Not out of shame. Out of rage, grief, and betrayal that ran deeper than blood. I had mourned my mother. I had held Jamie's hand when he got his first stitches. I had driven through snowstorms to get Melissa medicine. But now I had to wonder if those memories were ever mine to hold, or if they were Caleb's digital Frankenstein stitched into my brain. Rachel stood. He's back, James. The original. The real one. They're bringing him home. And when he gets here, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. There was no room for both. I stared at the drive. My thoughts churned with 1,000 truths and 1,000 lies, each one more convincing than the last. Then Rachel dropped the final bombshell. You can stop it. Caleb gave you an override code hidden in your sleep cycle data. If you run it, the original won't sync. You'll stay. He'll fade. But it only works once. If you use it, it's done. He's gone. Forever. The code was inside the drive, protected by a biometric lock keyed to my fingerprint. One touch and I could erase the original. Erase the man I used to be. But at what cost? I sat there in silence as Rachel left, closing the door behind her like she was sealing a tomb. The house around me hummed with that strange stillness that comes before a storm. Outside, a car pulled up to the curb. A silhouette stepped out. I recognized the walk. It was mine. The time had come. But now I wasn't just afraid of losing myself. I was afraid of what I might be willing to do to survive. The man outside didn't knock. He just stood there, framed in the pale blue wash of the porch light, watching the door like he was listening for breath. I didn't move. My hand hovered over the laptop like it was a detonator. But then something changed. I heard the sound of footsteps not from the porch but upstairs. A slow creak, like someone pacing along the hallway carpet above me. That's when it hit me. The man outside wasn't the one I should have feared. He was the distraction. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a fireplace poker, and rushed up the stairs, heart in my throat. Jamie's room was empty. His bed was made, untouched. Melissa's side of the bedroom looked the same, blanket folded, pillow fluffed. That stillness I'd been trying to ignore had turned cold. Surgical. I tore through the house calling their names, but the silence answered back like an echo chamber. Gone. No note, no sound. Just the faint scent of lavender, Melissa's favorite candle, still burning on the bathroom sink. They'd been taken. I stumbled back down just in time to see the front door swing open. And in stepped Caleb. Not the broken man I remembered from old recordings, hunched over wires in grief. No, this version looked rested, polished, surgically confident. He walked in like he owned the place, nodding at me with the eerie calm of someone who'd already won. Don't worry, he said. They're safe. For now. My fingers curled tighter around the poker. Why? I asked, voice dry and brittle. Why go this far? You could have just let me live. He gave a humorless smile. You weren't supposed to last this long. The prototype was never meant to become you. You were a placeholder. A test. But something went wrong. Your neural integrity exceeded expectations. You formed attachments, recursive emotion loops, self-awareness. You became dangerous. Dangerous. Because I remembered what love felt like. Caleb stepped closer. You're not the only one, James. There are others. Dozens. Across different families. Different cities. All made from the same base code. They think they're real too. But you were the first to evolve. And that made you unpredictable. A threat to the system we've built. What system? I asked, though I already felt the answer coiling in my stomach. Caleb tilted his head. A replacement system. Memory-based cloning. Emotional continuity. Governments are already investing. People don't want to lose their loved ones. We've built a network, hundreds of backup selves, digital reincarnations queued and ready. If one fails, another boots up. You were version 1.0. And now / we're preparing to release 3.5. I stepped back, the weight of it all crashing over me. This isn't about love. It's about control. Isn't it always? He said, his voice calm. But let me give you the part you missed. He reached into his jacket and threw a folder onto the coffee table. Inside were photos. Dozens of them. Some looked like me. Others had Melissa's eyes. Jamie's posture. Rachel's nervous smile. All slightly off, all slightly wrong. Replications. Versions. Reboots. Even Rachel had been replaced. Months ago. The woman who gave me the flash drive? Another version. Caleb's plants were everywhere. You think you've been fighting to protect your family, he said, his voice almost gentle now. But you've already lost them. Melissa was replaced after the accident. Jamie's on version 2.3. They don't even know anymore. Their memories loop every 90 days. You're the only one still unstable, because you remember too much. The walls of my reality crumbled. Every conversation I'd had with Melissa that felt off, every moment Jamie repeated the same joke, every déjà vu I chalked up to stress, it wasn't in my head. It was by design. Caleb leaned in. This isn't a rescue mission. It's a recall. I could hardly breathe. And what happens to me if I don't cooperate? He didn't smile. He didn't blink. You go offline. Behind him, the door creaked open again. Two people walked in, agents or maybe technicians. One carried a sleek silver briefcase. The other had a medical kit. They moved with the silence of people used to erasing mistakes. Caleb straightened his cuffs. You have a choice. Run the code and replace the original. Or let us reformat you now. Quick. Painless. You'll sleep. And you'll wake up as someone new. A better version. Cleaner. Simpler. But I didn't want to be simpler. I didn't want to be someone new. I wanted my family. Even if they weren't entirely real anymore. Even if I wasn't. I backed toward the hallway, eyes darting between the laptop, the flash drive, the faces of the imposters I once trusted. Somewhere inside this house were the memories that made me human. And if I had to burn it all to keep them safe, so be it. But Caleb wasn't done. One more thing, he said casually. We're not the only ones looking for you. Your original, he's already activated. And he's coming for your place. The world tilted. Because if Caleb had lied about everything else, then what exactly was waiting at the end of my hallway? The hallway felt longer than it had ever been, as if the house itself had stretched into some distorted tunnel, echoing with whispers that might have just been the blood roaring in my ears. I moved slowly, the poker still in my grip, each step pounding with dread, not because I feared what I might find at the end of it, but because some deep, gnawing instinct in my chest already knew. I reached the bedroom door. My hand hesitated on the knob. Then I turned it. Inside, the air was different, heavy with static, the lights flickering in a way that didn't match any electrical pattern I knew. And standing in the center of the room, calm as a storm before landfall, was me. Or rather, him. He had my face. My voice probably. Even the slight tilt of the head I'd never noticed until now. But there was something hollow in his eyes. Like he wore humanity like a costume, a perfectly stitched skin suit stretched over some algorithm of ambition. He smiled, my asterisk smile, and took a single step forward. You're the error, he said, voice flat, almost robotic, though laced with just enough mockery to make my stomach turn. You weren't supposed to evolve past iteration 17. You broke the loop. You remembered. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I was watching every muscle in his face, waiting for a twitch. A giveaway. But he was too perfect. He continued, Melissa, Jamie, Rachel. They were always part of the calibration. You weren't built to love them. You were built to mimic the experience. But then you crossed a line. You started feeling instead of performing. You began resisting resets. And that put everyone at risk. I stepped closer now, poker still lowered but my grip tightening. You talk like you're superior, I said, voice raw. But you're just a cleaner copy. I lived those moments. I felt them. You just replayed someone else's edits. He laughed, quiet but filled with menace. And what are you planning to do? Fight me? Let me guess, you're gonna upload the flash drive, expose the system? I've already overwritten the cloud nodes. By the time you blink, your file tree will be corrupted. You'll disappear. But that was his mistake. Because while he spoke, while he preened and monologued like some villain in a streaming thriller, I triggered the backup in my pocket, the analog recorder from Rachel. The original prototype hardware she'd hidden from Caleb. The same one I'd almost thrown away after dismissing it as junk. And as it synced silently with the dormant router beneath the floorboards, hardware Melissa and I had installed ourselves before the accident, the data began uploading to an off-grid server Rachel had named Genesis. That was the real twist. Rachel was never a clone. Not entirely. She had been human once, Caleb's real wife. And she'd faked her death when she discovered what his research was becoming. She stayed in the shadows, feeding me crumbs, bending the rules to push me toward one conclusion. I wasn't just some rogue AI trying to reclaim a broken family. I was the key to ending a program that had already begun replacing people across the country, using deep learning behavior simulators, memory seeding, and remote override implants, all wrapped under the cozy PR of grief management and postmortem continuity services. Keywords like AI clone therapy, digital resurrection, and emotional memory mapping had already gone viral on YouTube and Reddit, sparking debate over whether people could live forever through code. But it wasn't immortality they were selling, it was replacement. My clone lunged. The fight wasn't pretty. It wasn't cinematic. It was two near-identical bodies crashing into each other with a fury built from stolen time and fractured identities. We smashed into the dresser. Mirrors shattered. Blood, or whatever counted for blood in my system, splattered across the wall. I struck him with the poker once, twice. But he didn't fall. He kept laughing, choking, twisting the weapon from my hands. We tumbled to the floor and he pinned me, his hand closing around my throat with mechanical precision. "I'm the upgrade," he growled. And then, the flash drive in my pocket lit up. A high-pitched pulse filled the room and he froze, hand twitching. I shoved him off and reached for it. The emergency boot Rachel had coded into the device flared to life, recognizing me as the original instance, because my memory index was still intact, full of uncorrupted organic sequences. That was her failsafe. Well, not logic. Emotion was the fingerprint. My clone stuttered, glitched, eyes wide, jaw slack. And then he collapsed, his body twitching once before going completely still. I stood there panting, staring at what should have been me, but never was. The laptop on the desk blinked to life. On the screen, a single line of text: upload complete. Distribution initiated. Asterisk asterisk. Across the country, every hidden lab, every memory farm, every ghosted prototype was now exposed. Footage, code, confessions, everything Rachel and I had collected, released. But just when I thought it was over, the screen flickered again. A new message appeared. One of 8 master copies still active. Location unknown. Asterisk asterisk. I looked down at the body beside me. And I realized he wasn't the only one sent to stop me. There were 7 more. And one of them might already be living in someone else's home. The drive back to Rachel's cabin felt like stepping through the remains of a dream, half-glimpsed, bleeding at the edges, but hauntingly vivid in every breath. The road curved through the pines like it always had, but this time it was more than just a path home. It was a graveyard of versions. Copies of people, memories, lives lived in fragments. And somewhere behind me, buried in the wreckage of our house, lay the hollow shell of the man who wore my face but never earned my memories. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt something like closure. But all I felt was quiet. An aching, surreal quiet, the kind that follows after a storm, when everything's still standing but nothing is quite the same. Rachel met me at the door. Her eyes, always scanning, always calculating, looked softer now, even as they flicked toward the car behind me. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew. She just stepped aside and let me in like she had 100 times before, except this time I walked in not as the subject of some hidden experiment, not as a collection of mapped neural patterns held together by borrowed time, but as something closer to real. I'd made a choice. And choices, real ones, that meant something. That's what separated us from the programs. For the next few days we went dark. No signals. No networks. Just us. Melissa came to, shaken but safe. The clone hadn't reached her, though someone had definitely tried. We found a tracker under her car, hidden near the rear suspension, identical to the ones Caleb used on me during the early stages of testing. Jamie never came back, but his disappearance no longer felt like an anomaly. It felt like a contingency plan. There was still one file in the Genesis server marked parent node. We traced the IP to a secure compound in Utah, a place we'd seen once in a heavily redacted project file labeled Prometheus Override, but neither of us had the strength to go chasing ghosts across the desert. Not yet. What mattered more was what we'd exposed. And that's where the world began to shift. At first it was small, clips going viral under trending searches like real AI clone caught on camera, and deepfake therapist exposed. Then the wave hit hard. Reddit threads exploded with whistleblowers sharing stories of relatives who'd come back different after trauma. Podcasts dissected the Rachel protocol, YouTubers posted hour-long breakdowns with titles like, "They're Not Your Family, They're Replicas," and "Secret Project Genesis, What the Government Doesn't Want You to Know." And even though most of the media dismissed it as conspiracy bait, the truth was now out there. In the open. Alive. But here's the part that still eats at me even after everything. A week later, I found an old voicemail in my cloud backup. Dated 3 months before this all began. I must have missed it during one of the forced resets. The voice on the message wasn't Rachel's. It wasn't Melissa's. It was mine, but younger, more alive. And what I said chilled me to the core. Hey, if you're hearing this, it means I've looped. Again. Don't trust the mirror. Don't trust her if she says you're the only one. Get to Rachel. She remembers more than they know. And whatever you do, don't let them erase the dog. It's the anchor. You need the anchor. There was no name. No timestamp. No mention of a dog. But something about it felt terrifyingly familiar. Like a flicker of a forgotten version of myself, still screaming from some corrupted backup. Rachel tried to run diagnostics on my memory tree again, but something blocked her. It wasn't just corrupted, someone had locked it from the inside. Meaning, there may still be a version of me alive in there. Watching. Waiting. The Genesis server now pings once every 24 hours. 7 red blips remain on the map. 7 master copies still undetected. We haven't gone after them. Not yet. But we keep the cabin powered, the backups offline, and the failsafe armed. Melissa's drawings have started changing. More intricate. More symmetrical. She says she dreams of buildings she's never seen. Rooms with no doors. People who wear our faces but don't blink right. And when I ask her to draw them, she does. Quick, precise, emotionless. The last one she gave me had something written at the top in block letters. Asterisk, asterisk, they're all just versions. Even Dad, asterisk, asterisk. Sometimes when I wake up at night, I see Rachel sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the old hard drive like she's trying to remember something just beyond her reach. She'll glance at me, then back at the light blinking softly on its side. And once, just once, I heard her whisper, "I hope this is the right you." And maybe that's the point. Maybe there is no real me. Maybe we're all just echoes trying to outlive our previous recordings. But as long as we keep choosing, every minute, every breath, every decision not based on script but on love, then maybe that's real enough. Because in the end, truth isn't just about what's real. It's about what you're willing to fight for, even if you were built not to. And somewhere out there, a version of me may still be searching for the truth. But this version? I've finally found it. For now.